Hey everybody, welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North, who is back from his beach trip with a nice tan. And we are back here to talk about all things TCU sports as we get ready for another football game this weekend. TCU playing host to the BYU Cougars in a renewal of the Mountain West rivalry between these two teams. It should be a great environment at Amon G. Carter Stadium on Saturday. 2:30 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. So a national TV game for the redshirt freshman quarterback Josh Hoover, who is going to make his first career start as a Frog, filling in for the injured Chandler Morris. We will talk about that game and more on our midweek episode this evening. Anthony, tell us about the trip, man. How was it?
Yeah, man, we had a great time out there in Miami, Florida. Took the kids out to the beach, to Miami Beach, and got to stay on the beach and hit the ocean for many hours every day. Lots of jumping into waves and building sandcastles and all of that great stuff. It was terrific. Went to the Miami Heat game last night. They had their first preseason game of the season. They were taking on the Charlotte Hornets. So that was fun. Got to bring my kids to their first NBA game. I haven't taken them out to, we've got the NBA team right here down the street in Dallas. Haven't been out to a game there, but went to one on vacation. So that was a good time. And a little bit travel weary today, flew back today and had a couple delays and just kind of some up and downs. That Miami airport is pretty gigantic. And so the people movers were not working and the tram between terminals wasn't working. So it was a lot of walking, carrying all the stuff with all the kids. So here we are Wednesday night, still at it, ready to chat about this BYU game coming up. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, basketball, hard to believe it's back already. I feel like we just got started with football season here a few weeks ago, and we're going to be talking about TCU basketball before we know it. And we actually do have a brief TCU basketball item to hit on later in the podcast, as there was a recruitment announcement just a short while ago that was tweeted. We'll hit on that. But before we get into everything this evening, of course, this episode is brought to y'all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. We are doing a giveaway this week, as well as the BYU podcast in the 1012 network. If you haven't checked out our Twitter page, go to our Frogs O War Twitter account and check out the information there about the giveaway. T-shirt available. Go to our Twitter. Make sure you're following us. Give a retweet there. Retweet Charlie Hustle as well for a chance to win. The deadline is kickoff on Saturday, so check that out. Charlie Hustle has great TCU swag. CharlieHustle.com. Use the promo code FrogsOWar for 15% off all TCU items, or use the promo code 101215 TEN1215 for 15% off any non-sale items online. CharlieHustle.com. The Patreon is live if y'all want to support the two of us here on Frogs Up or any of the other Big 12 podcasts in the 1012 network. Go to patreon.com/1012 network. An update again on the On It Athlete TCU football trading cards. I know I spoke about this briefly on Sunday when we recorded our weekend episode. The October 2nd shipment date is being pushed back. The presale window is still open on those. We are pushing very hard on them for more information, and we will provide any updates on new shipment dates as soon as we can. The last we were told is that they are still awaiting some photos and information from the university before they go into the printing process. And I think a few other of their lines of cards have been delayed a little bit as well. So we do apologize for that, and we will provide an update as soon as we can about the On It trading cards. If y'all want any more information, you can go to our socials, Facebook and Twitter at Frogs of War, or online at frogswar.com for more information about that. All right, TCU football. These last couple of weekends have been very difficult as fans, and we're hoping that we can get back on the winning track with a game at Amon G. Carter Stadium Saturday against BYU. The Mountain West rivals clashing for the first time in several years. BYU off to a pretty good start this season, 4-1 overall, 1-1 in the conference, picking up a win over Cincinnati and a loss at Kansas 38-27. BYU also beat Arkansas earlier this season in a game where it looked like the Razorbacks were going to pull away, and BYU was able to come back and win that game from behind. There's a lot of veteran talent on this team, and BYU looking to make a statement in Fort Worth this weekend. So, Anthony, what are just some of your first impressions about this BYU team and the kind of game that you expect this could be on Saturday at 2:30?
Yeah, I think it'll be a pretty good battle. BYU has impressed me more than I expected. They've exceeded my expectations. Um, I came into the season pretty low on them and thought that they would be among one of the worst teams in the conference, and they've well exceeded that. That win over Arkansas is a good win, as kind of bad as the Arkansas season is turning out to be. That home win over Cincinnati a couple weeks ago is a pretty good win, and battling with Kansas is nothing to sneeze at either. That's a pretty good Kansas team. So, I think BYU is going to come out and be pretty well coached. I've been generally down on their coaching staff, but I think that the last few years, and I think a little bit of that was I attributed a lot of that success of the Zach Wilson years to Zach Wilson of, hey, you've got this kind of generational guy that, is going to go out and make a lot of great things happen and save your football team from a lot of things and kind of overcome whatever coaching, I don't know, discrepancies there may be. But really, I think they've bounced back pretty nicely in succeeding from moving on from Zach Wilson. So, that's my first impression of them is they've just been more impressive than I expected so far this season.
And BYU at the quarterback position, of course, Jaron Hall is no longer there. Puka Nacua is doing huge things in the NFL and for many fantasy football rosters around the country at the wide receiver position. But the Cougars do have a veteran quarterback in Keaton Slovis, who has been around for a while. For those who are college football fans, you know that name from his time at USC. Highly recruited quarterback, is really one of multiple former USC quarterbacks that are currently starters around the country. You think about Jackson Dart, who's a transfer starting now for Ole Miss. JT Daniels, of course, has been all over the place. Now he's playing quarterback at Rice after stops in West Virginia, Georgia. But Keaton Slovis is a player who had a really, really good freshman season for the Trojans, threw for 30 touchdown passes, completed, I think, about 70% of his passes. But he had some injuries over his second and third seasons with the Trojans. And then you have the coaching change with Lincoln Riley coming in from Oklahoma. He brings Caleb Williams along with him. And Keaton Slovis ultimately transfers to Pitt. He played for the Pitt Panthers last season, and now here he is at BYU, playing some pretty good ball. Has only turned the ball over a few times, but the biggest difference I noticed in just looking at his numbers is that his completion percentage is way down from where it was at USC. As a Trojan, he was completing roughly 68% of his passes, and that number has dropped all the way down to about 58, 59%. So maybe it's the injuries, maybe it's not playing at USC with some of those elite running backs and wide receivers, but he's a veteran quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over too much. And I think, honestly, if you were to rate the quarterbacks that TCU has played over these first 7 weeks of the season, you would put him in the upper half. I would probably rate him second behind Shedeur Sanders. I think Keaton Slovis is better than Donovan Smith. I think he's better than Rocco Becht and Garrett Green and probably Preston Stone as well, just because Preston Stone hasn't played many, big time opponents. But it's going to be an interesting matchup, I'd say, between a TCU secondary that has looked very good over the last few weeks, has done a tremendous job in coverage, going up against experienced quarterback that has a track record of success and hasn't turned the ball over too much. So, Anthony, looking at this BYU team, what can you add about Keaton Slovis or just this BYU offense as a whole?
Yeah, I think that battle in the secondary is going to be really interesting to watch. I mean, Chase Roberts, receiver for BYU, is right now sitting fifth in the conference in average receiving yards per game. He already has 3 touchdowns on the season, a couple of pretty impressive athletic catches out there. I think that's a guy that can really get things done for the Cougars on Saturday. So I think he's probably what scares you the most for TCU. That said, the TCU secondary has been really strong the last few weeks, and as much as the team as a whole has looked pretty poor the last couple weeks, I think still that secondary has been out there making plays and continues to show really good coverage, and I think will continue to do so here. Um, and Roberts really isn't the only guy. They've got a pretty good list down the line of people who can who can take advantage of things. So I mean, Isaac Rex at tight end has been around for a long time. It feels like he's been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think he's another guy that can definitely go make things happen. He's maybe the top receiving tight end in the conference right now. Maybe the guy at Kansas State is probably up there as well. But um, a lot of talent. Lassiter's is the outside receiver, and maybe doesn't have the stats that those other two guys have, but is another really dangerous guy. So I think it is that passing game that um, is what probably scares TCU the most. That said, they've got a pretty good 1-2 punch at running back. Aiden Robbins and LJ Martin are both very, very capable backs and have been around for a long time. Robbins has been around for a long time. Martin is a freshman and has been impressive in his freshman season. But yeah, the thing is, it's hard to totally gauge yet what they're going to do in this new Big 12. Clearly stepping up in competition. The splitting the games with Cincinnati and Kansas, it's hard to really know yet where they fit in the pecking order, and certainly where TCU this season fits in the pecking order. Right now, sitting very low on that power ranking. But I think these are teams, if you look at just like the raw stats, are very similarly in the middle of the pack, both offensively yards production and defensively yards allowed, both right there in like the 7-8 range of the conference. And so this game will kind of serve as a tipping point again, kind of like last week did against Iowa State, of where are you going to fall for the Horned Frogs? And holding this offense down, I think, will be a challenge. But frankly, I think TCU, that's the way for TCU to go win this game, is TCU is going to have to make sure to get Keaton Slovis and this offense off the field as soon as possible.
And for the TCU offense, it's going to be our first chance to see Josh Hoover get a start and get a full week of first team reps as the starting quarterback. As many of y'all know who are listening this evening, Chandler Morris injured his knee during the game against Iowa State. It's an MCL injury, the same knee that he injured against Colorado last season. Sonny Dykes said that it's going to be a week-to-week issue. It doesn't sound like it's going to be season-ending for Chandler Morris, which is good news. But I think a lot of fans are excited to see what Josh Hoover can do. And listening to some of his teammates and to Sonny Dykes talk about what Hoover can bring to the table, one thing that was brought up was his deep ball. And he's a quarterback that's not afraid to sling the ball around the field. And I think it's definitely going to help Hoover with having a full week of practice and more time to work exclusively with the first team offense, as opposed to being rushed in on emergency duty where, let's be honest, he hasn't looked very good. I expect Josh Hoover to come out and have a good performance in this game compared to what we've seen from him so far. That said, I want TCU to really establish the run in this game, particularly because BYU is going to be without its leading tackler at linebacker, Ben Bywater. He leads the defense in tackles. He got injured in the Kansas game, and this is an opportunity for TCU's offense, specifically Imani Bailey, who had a great game against West Virginia, or excuse me, against Iowa State, 152 rushing yards on 21 carries, with an offensive line that made some adjustments with personnel, moving some guys around. I think this is going to be a big opportunity to see if TCU can really get the run game going and make it easier on Josh Hoover. You don't want to put him making his first career start on national television. You don't want to put a player like that in a position to where he's going to have to carry the load offensively. So I think it's going to be huge for TCU to come out and control the football, control the time of possession, get the run game going, and allow Josh Hoover to make throws off of that, whether it's some simple RPOs or maybe they finally open up the playbook a little bit and take some deep shots down the field. I thought Hoover made a couple of nice throws over the middle and down the field during the last game, but maybe we see a different side of the TCU offense with Josh Hoover at quarterback than we did at Chandler Morris. Anthony, when you look at this matchup against this BYU defense that has been prone at times to giving up some points this year, what's going to be the key to success for Josh Hoover in this offense to try and turn this early part of the season around?
Yeah, BYU enters this game as last in the conference in sacks defensively. Um, Not just sacks total because they've only played 5 games, but sacks per game as well. Um, and so it will be huge for the TCU offensive line to make sure that stat remains that way. Um, do not allow this team to get to Josh Hoover. If I do think that Hoover has shown that when given some amount of time, and I think, like you said, the week of practice as the guy and the offense being created around him for this week, um, I kind of expect him to come in and ball out in this game. I think he has an opportunity to have a really, really big game here. Um, I will say BYU does force interceptions at a pretty high rate. They're averaging over 1 per game. So, and we've certainly seen Hoover show some willingness to throw the ball to the other team. And, and that may be part of him just chucking it around the field a little bit. If it is, hey, we want you to take these deep shots, every once in a while those might be intercepted, and you kind of have to live with that, and that's okay. And so, yeah, I think Hoover comes out and has a big game. Um, I would expect still TCU to rely on that run game just because it's been very, very successful. And you do want to take the load off of Hoover as much as you possibly can, particularly if you can, create some play action opportunities or run pass option opportunities where it makes some of that thinking a little bit simpler for him, where he's able to take that extra split second where the defense is caught a little bit off guard to make the play. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to see what Hoover is going to do in this one. I think it's a good game to come in. I think this very much could end up like how Chandler Morris in 2021 came out and had a big game against Baylor, and then the next game had a hideous game against Oklahoma State. I think this one we could see Josh Hoover have a tremendous statistical game against BYU, and then next week in Manhattan becomes a little bit of a house of horrors for him. So, yeah, I think TCU will definitely have some success offensively on Saturday.
And as we get into the keys to victory here for TCU, our expectations have obviously shifted quite a bit over the last few weeks from expecting TCU to dominate some of these quote unquote lesser teams in the conference to I think we just need to get a win by any means necessary here. Even if the final score is something ugly like 10-7 or 14-10. I think most TCU fans would be happy just to win a football game here and snap this 2-game losing streak and get to 4-3, get back to 2-2 in the conference, and hopefully make a push for 6 wins in a bowl game. So I think offensively, we've talked about TCU needing to establish the run and get that going and make the game easier for Josh Hoover. Defensively, I think TCU is going to have to make some game-changing plays in order to win because as you mentioned with BYU's defense being able to generate some turnovers via interceptions, Josh Hoover is going to make some mistakes in this game. It's only natural that a redshirt freshman making his first career start against a quality opponent, there are going to be some mistakes made in this game. I think we have to keep that in mind. And with that in mind, the defense is going to need to step up and make some big plays. I know the defense has played pretty well over the last few weeks. We haven't had too many huge plays. I think about the Josh Newton interception earlier in the year where he nearly brings it back to the house. TCU is going to need plays like that in this game, I think, in order to win. So the matchup that I brought up previously between the TCU secondary and Keaton Slovis, that's a matchup I think they have to not only win, but also dominate. They got to find a way to generate some turnovers because it hasn't come from the guys up front. TCU has struggled to get pressure. That's not news. We know that. So I think it's going to be on those guys in the back five to make some big plays, break up passes. We've seen all of them do it. Abe Kamara has had some huge plays. Bud Clark has had multiple interceptions this year. Josh Newton has been that dude. So that's a key to victory for me with this defense is that secondary is going to have to generate some turnovers. And then someone on special teams just needs to do something positive. I mean, the special teams for TCU
or just something not negative, right?
It's been so bad and your special teams is bad when you have people on social media who are calling your kicker and your punter out by name. That you never want to see that, and it's tough because the special teams for TCU were such a strength last year, and it just hasn't been the case this season. So we need to see better play on special teams. John Paul Richardson looks like he might be the guy on punt returns now. Hopefully he can make something happen there. Major Everhart has shown some flashes in the kick return game. Had a couple of nice returns against Iowa State. I think he had one called back for a penalty, but has shown some flashes there. Hopefully Jordy Sandy can punt the ball over 40 yards this weekend. That would also be nice. And hopefully Griffin Kell can keep the ball in bounds on kickoffs and have a clean game in field goals. So with all that said, I guess, Anthony, for you, before we get into predictions, what's your key or your keys to victory in this matchup?
Yeah, on your special teams, I guess that you don't have to return every kickoff out of the end zone from 5 yards deep to like the 15-yard line. You could just take the ball for a touchback or fair catch it and take the ball at the 25. That's just fine, Major. We're okay with that. Yeah, so I think this what I'm struggling with here is looking at this game. I feel very similarly as I did in both the Iowa State game and the West Virginia game of looking at all the ways this game can play out. I feel like TCU is very much the better team, and every statistical thing is pointing to TCU winning in every way. BYU is last in the conference, also in yards per game offensively, but just behind West Virginia and Iowa State. So, it's as much as the TCU defense can hold down these offenses that are not super high powered. Ultimately, you've got to get the ball in the end zone. You've got to score points to win the game. And obviously, as simple as that sounds, that has been a major struggle for the Horned Frogs really all season. And while the BYU defense is not going to be as strong, I don't think, as West Virginia's or Iowa State's, and that shows up statistically as well, it's hard not to see that same possible outcome falling here, particularly with Josh Hoover in his first start. So, um, you know, that's where my struggle is can TCU just play a clean game? We've talked about this game, even at home. I do expect a pretty large BYU crowd presence to be at this game. And I've talked about it a bunch on this podcast, but being an old Mountain West guy myself, that the games against BYU when I was a student at TCU were some of the most heated, exciting games that we played each year. And their fans, while they bring a level of nice, they're still very excited, heatable, loud fans, and really get into into their support for the Cougars. So I don't know how much home field plays into this, but I really just want to see TCU play a clean game. Let's bring back these penalties, where you're getting 5+, 7+ penalties every week. That's just killing you on both sides of the ball. Like you said, the mistakes on special teams, just there's no reason to be seeing those. We may expect some mistakes out of Josh Hoover, but you just have to have everything else go normal. If they could just play a normal, clean football game, I think TCU walks away relatively clean in this one. My prediction I'll give on the score. Are we getting into that yet? Have we started that yet? Are we
Yeah,
going to
let's go ahead
predictions?
and let's jump into our predictions here. And one thing to note is the line initially opened up with TCU as a 5-point favorite. TCU right now is a 6-point favorite in this game. Maybe Vegas knows something that we don't, but
Yeah,
uh,
and I'll say on that, I think that with Chandler Morris in this game, and probably headed into prior to the Iowa State game last week, the look ahead line on this was probably TCU being at home against a team that certainly in the Vegas power rankings finds highly favorable over TCU over BYU. This line might have been 12-13
mhm.
for the Frogs. So while Chandler Morris is an important player at the most important position on the team, is he really worth 2 touchdowns of value there? So I understand where the -5. I know it's kind of like, how is TCU ever going to win another game again? That's kind of where our spiraling negativity brain goes. But I can see it the other way of like, look, TCU is probably going to be a near 2 touchdown favorite before the Chandler Morris injury. How much is Chandler Morris really worth to a gambling line? I think they've moved the line quite a lot from where it would have been if it was Chandler Morris, and TCU is appropriately favored here. Does it get down into a field goal territory by game time? Clearly it's trending the other way. People are still supporting and the Frogs here, and the movement has continued towards TCU.
And for my prediction, I have TCU winning 21-17. I think this is going to be a defensive battle throughout most of the game. As I mentioned before, I think Josh Hoover is going to have some mistakes in this game, but I think he'll play just well enough for TCU to win. I'm expecting the Frogs to come out after the adjustments they made on the offensive line, specifically in the second half, the way they moved some guys around. They got back to a rotation that I really like, with Coker at right tackle and Coleman at left tackle, with a little more size on the interior, with Willis Patrick, all 6'4", 347 of him at right guard, and Colton Deary, the Maryland transfer, at 6'4", 345 at left guard. I think TCU is going to get some good push up front. I think the Frogs are going to come out, run the ball well, and the defense is going to be able to make enough plays to keep this a winnable game, 21-17. is my final prediction for this one.
Yeah, I've got it close here as well, a 24-20 win for the Horned Frogs. I don't see BYU getting 3 touchdowns in this game without a lot of help from an interception return for a touchdown, a scoop and score, or some kind of funky special teams play, which is certainly possible. But I don't think this TCU defense is going to back down and slow down any here. I think that TCU holds Keaton Slovis down pretty well, and whatever other weapons that BYU will throw at them. Offensively, there's just too much talent. I just can't see this group of collection of talent going out and completely laying an egg against BYU here. Now, are we approaching a spot where the motivation? I don't want to use any of the Q word or anything like that, but does the motivation start to dwindle for some of these guys? I think that's possible. It's possible we start to see that for TCU, but I do think TCU still has a lot of its goals in front of it, or at least some pride to go out there and take care of business in this game and show that, at least on an individual by individual level, that you can't go out and completely get outclassed by BYU in a game like this. So I have TCU scoring 24 points. I think it's possible, like I said, that Josh Hoover comes out and is just on fire and really lights it up, and TCU finally shows that offense that everybody's thought that it could have in its pocket at some point, and maybe it gets released on Saturday. But I still am conservatively giving it a TCU win, 24-20.
And y'all can follow our coverage leading up to this game at our website, frogsaward.com. We will have some more preview content on our website, including our roundtable, where we will give our collective thoughts as a staff on this game. That article should be up here in the next couple of days. And looking ahead as well this weekend to the Big 12 matchups, we have some really good matchups this weekend, and you might as well just leave your TV on FS1, because almost every Big 12 game this weekend will be on FS1. We have, of course, TCU and BYU at 2:30 on ESPN, but we have West Virginia at Houston kicking off tomorrow night, which is Thursday night at 6 p.m. on FS1, and then a full slate of morning, afternoon, evening action in the Big 12, beginning with Iowa State at Cincinnati on Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff on FS1. Kansas taking on Oklahoma State on the road. Cowboys looking to build on a very surprising win over Kansas State, although I will say I did call the trap game last weekend when we talked about it on the podcast. I'll give myself a few kudos for that one. We'll see if the Cowboys can pick up another home upset here over Kansas, who's now number 23 in the country. That'll be 2:30 p.m. kickoff, also on FS1. Doesn't look like Jalen Daniels is going to play in that game. That'll be, I believe, 3 weeks in a row where he has not played, but they've been scoring points with Jason Bean under center anyway. So that should be an exciting game. And then Kansas State at Texas Tech. Interesting matchup for the Wildcats, who are coming off a tough loss, and then Texas Tech, who blew out Baylor and won pretty handily last weekend. That'll be the night game, 6 p.m. kickoff, again on FS1. Pretty light schedule again with some teams on buys. But Anthony, looking at this Week 7 Big 12 content, what are the matchups that you're most excited about, and what are your thoughts on these games here?
Yeah, with Texas and Oklahoma both taking a breather after the Red River kind of thriller last week. That's kind of unfortunate. They don't have to go back to back there after that one. But yeah, the West Virginia Houston game is just fun because of the Dana Holgerson of it all. West Virginia obviously off to kind of a blazing start here, but it can get negative in a hurry there if you go to Houston and lose to Dana. Obviously, the history there with him being their former head coach for the Mountaineers. And then for Holgerson himself in Houston, this is not trending very well for him to continue as the head football coach there for the Cougars. So that ends up being, for West Virginia now, every game the rest of the way is a huge game for them for their season, because they are now in the driver's seat to get to Arlington for the Big 12 championship. If they continue to take care of business, they've got a very manageable schedule. They've got I think they play at Oklahoma, but other than that, it's all teams that they will probably be favored against or toss up type games. So, excited to see just how that kind of emotion on a Thursday night, kind of early evening, in Houston. Poor Houston keeps getting these games that are kind of like in weird time windows, but yeah, down the rest of the line, I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, the Kansas State Texas Tech is the one that intrigues me next most, because Texas Tech, like the last few weeks, have seemed to start to put it together a little bit more, even with the Tyler Shough injury. And Kansas State losing that game to Oklahoma State was a big surprise. And so, how do they recover from that in what will certainly be a tough environment there? So, those are probably my highlight games. I'm interested to see how that plays out, and we're now a little bit on the watch of, can anybody ensure that Texas and Oklahoma don't get that Red River rematch in Arlington for the Big 12 championship. We're already halfway through with the season, at least for TCU, having already played 6 games, which is crazy. This season is flying by, despite how poor it's been for our Frogs. But that's kind of where the attention turns now is, okay, how does this start setting up for conference standing positioning going forward? And then, some of these teams fighting for bowl position too. So exciting stuff in the Big 12, but those are my 2 games I'm most interested in.
And as a staff on frogsaward.com, we'll also have our roundtable pick'em, where we give our thoughts on not only these Big 12 games, but also some of the big national games around the country. So continue to follow us at frogsaward.com as we bring not only the latest and greatest in TCU sports, but also in the Big 12 and around college football. I think that will wrap it up for our football discussion this evening. We do have some other TCU items to hit on. First, we will transition to the basketball item that I teased at the start of our podcast this evening. TCU picking up its second commitment for the class of 2024, getting a 3-star combo guard, Ashton Simmons. TCU already has a commitment from 4-star forward Micah Robinson. Ashton Simmons from Beaumont, Texas, close to being rated as a 4-star by the 247 composite ratings. I know the 247 ratings for basketball are a little different than they are for football in terms of how closely the composite is to the actual 247. But a talented combo guard, and TCU basketball season's going to be here before we know it. We've kind of teased here and there TCU basketball, the amount of talent coming back, Emmanuel Miller and some of the key guys from last season, along with all the transfer portal additions. TCU's got a lot of talent coming through the pipeline, and there are going to be some more announcements coming over the next several weeks from players with TCU on their radar. So a big commitment here for TCU. Anthony, any brief thoughts here about what this could mean just for the program here?
Yeah, I think it's just the recruiting momentum has continued to build under Jamie Dixon, and I think he's, this class that is incoming true freshmen starting for this season with Posey and Manning, I think is probably 2 of the top recruits TCU's had maybe ever. And I think Dixon is continuing to build on, he's had little success, then big success. And so I think that's also showing in the recruiting cycles as well. And I think it can only continue to improve. I mean, not just in high school recruiting, but the transfer recruiting. Obviously, brought in a huge crop of transfers this off season, and I think that should continue as TCU basketball and Big 12 basketball. People are going to be wanting to get their foot in that door and come play for Dixon, play with these teams that he's building, and really show out on the biggest stage in college basketball.
Mm-hmm. And TCU Volleyball had a match earlier this evening that wrapped up just a short while ago. TCU picking up a 3-2 win on the road against Oklahoma today. Looked like TCU was actually going to go down. They lost the first two sets and were trailing late in the third set, but a big rally from the Frogs to be able to tie it at 27-27 late in the third set. Audrey Knowles, the all Big 12 preseason outside hitter, had a couple of huge plays late in that third set, had a key block and a kill to seal that third set 29-27. And then TCU coming back, taking the fourth set and the fifth set tiebreaker to defeat an Oklahoma team that came in, I believe, 6-8 on the year and winless in conference. So a big win for TCU to be able to avoid that trap game loss against the Sooners and moving to 12-6 overall on the season, 5-2 in conference play. Audrey Knowles had a double-double with 13 kills and 12 digs. Riley Buckley had 39 assists. TCU will be on the road this weekend against West Virginia on Saturday. We will recap that along with the BYU football game on our weekend episode, which we'll be recording this coming Sunday evening and posting Monday morning, along with TCU soccer, which will have a home match tomorrow, Thursday evening at Garvey Rosenthal against Houston, and the Frogs will be at home again against Baylor on Sunday. We talked a little bit on our last episode about the regular season coming to a close here for TCU. Only 3 matches left before the Big 12 tournament. Houston, Baylor, and then a road match on Monday the 23rd against the Texas Longhorns. So be sure to follow TCU Soccer, TCU Volleyball. We will continue to cover all of those programs on our website, frogsofwar.com. Anthony, any final thoughts on any of our content before we go ahead and sign off for the evening?
Yeah, I think just on soccer, these are your last 2 chances, at least in the regular season, to get out to Garvey Rosenthal for a game. And I certainly encourage all TCU fans, anybody who's local in the DFW area, go check out one of these games. I think for the Baylor game, they're giving away a T-shirt for the first few hundred fans. So I would definitely suggest trying to get yourself a ticket and getting out there. They put on a good show, and that Baylor game in particular is a big time game. I think Baylor's struggling a little bit this season. They're still in the upper half of the conference, but they have Tyler Isgrig, who transferred from TCU after last season, who's a pretty dynamic offensive player. So that'll be a challenging game. The Houston game is one that TCU has to win. That's a team near the bottom of the conference, and really they need to pick up a win there. But that Baylor game should be a really terrific contest to close the home slate for the regular season. The other thing before we close on Charlie Hustle, where you can use our code Frogs of War or the 10-12-15. Here in North Texas, temperatures dropping a little bit. We're getting under the 80s, low 80s into the 70s. Evenings are into the 60s. So they've got some great sweatshirts on there that I definitely encourage you go check out. They've got the purple hoodie with the Frogs script and a couple of other really great ones. So go check out their sweatshirt. If you've already bought up all the T-shirt offerings that they have for the Horned Frogs, go in there and get your sweatshirts. And as we get into the fall and winter time, you're going to be wanting to wear those out to all your TCU events and out on the town as well.
And again, if y'all haven't seen our giveaway that we're doing in honor of the TCU BYU game, go to our Twitter. We have a graphic there that Charlie Hustle made up for us, and give us a retweet and a follow, and retweet Charlie Hustle as well for a chance to win that giveaway. That will be running through Saturday up until kickoff Saturday afternoon. So continue to support us here on Frogs Up. check out the Charlie Hustle promo. Also, check out our Patreon with the 1012 Network if you would like to support. Again, patreon.com/1012 Network. That will do it for our midweek episode. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We appreciate all of the listeners and all of the support, everybody listening to us on Frogs Up and following our content online at frogsawar.com and on our socials as well. So we will be back Sunday evening to talk about the BYU football game and all of the latest and greatest in TCU sports. Until then, we will sign off this evening with a Frogs Up.
Frogs up.